So this week at DMAC, you're handed a prompt, make a concept in 60-second video. What kind of went through your mind as soon as you got that assignment prompt?
Well, originally I was really excited, and I thought this would be easy for me because I had this whole idea of literacy that I wanted to explore, and I had some slides and some pictures, and so when they gave us the camera and said, go out, so I immediately started taking pictures of the construction crew working and the different things happening. So I thought, okay, this is going to work. Yeah, I was wrong. It didn't work. I couldn't get that one piece that would make it all gel together. So then I was kind of stymied about what I was going to do next. I didn't know what I was looking for. I just knew I hadn't found it, because every time I kept trying to put it together, I felt like I was shoving something together that wasn't working for me. So I knew I had to just stop and dump that concept and find a whole new one, which then of course panicked me because I was on a time frame. So that was very difficult. And I'm sitting there going, okay, how do I get this done?
When we first got the assignment, I was actually pretty nervous about what was expected of me. And, just that experience of going from having no experience with the technology, not having an idea of where I was going to go, it was very different than what I'm used to. So when I sit down to write an essay or to write a story, I feel like even if I don't know where it's going, I know that I'm going to get there. I know kind of what it's going to look like. I can visualize the structure, right? I sat down to do this assignment, and it was just chaos.
So I conceptualized and thought also about what can I manage, what technology can I deal with. And I used to be a newspaper reporter, and I think my sense, and I think I must be a frustrated documentary maker, so my sense was going out and trying to report a story using the technology I'd just been introduced to.
A different direction?
Some of my initial thoughts were more interview based with people around me. So there was definitely interest in other projects and in other areas and stuff, but just with limitations of space and time, and say, okay, for this particular assignment, I might want to focus it down even a little bit more. And also, I'm going to be moving in a few months, so that kind of made me think. Got me thinking about creating space as I start looking for new furniture and for new lighting arrangements and stuff.
I was pondering the project, and it was really an offhand remark that Cindy made as I was thinking about what I could do for that project. She said, you should do something with music, just because she knows that music is an important part of my life. And so in some ways, this is a confession, I thought, what do I have right at hand that will make it possible for me to make this video in the next 24 hours? So in some ways, it's just a very practical decision.
First of all, I came up with some topics. So I thought, what are some things that I can do in this amount of time, thinking about the constraints as well as collecting footage. So I had this camera and I was going to go out at lunch, and so I think I had a list of 5. I can't remember what they all are at the moment. But then I didn't have the time to get the footage that I wanted. However, I had prepared in advance, coming with all of my pictures that I've taken, as well as footage from my iPhone. And so then it was an issue of, well, I have this footage, so maybe I should start there and then move forward. But then when I started going through the images, that's kind of when it shifted to, okay, this is not what I thought it was going to be. And so I think that my process was more about the tools, what was there, and then using what I could find, and my topic just evolved as I was in iMovie, playing around.
I struggled a lot in starting, and I had several ideas and that I really wanted to go, and I was going to need to film a lot of really little tiny pieces. I had this initial idea, but I was going to film all these things of people doing things with their hands, and it was going to be all these small quick shots, but then I didn't know where that was going to go. I just kind of thought it would look cool, and then I realized I didn't have that kind of time to go film that, and then also to go edit it. And so I sort of went back and forth and just trying to figure out what did I actually have time to accomplish and figuring out what to sort of be realistic about. And so I kind of had to slow myself down a little bit. So then I started thinking about, right, what do I already sort of have with me? And so those restraints that I had, I think ended up actually being incredibly productive for me, because I had to think about what could I get done in this space, and I was really happy with sort of the way that it turned out. So
it definitely started from the framework that Scott had given us, and then from there thinking really not about the concept that I wanted to do, but from the constraints of the project being the 60 seconds and how that could provide inspiration for whatever project I decided to do.
I was looking at the assignment sheet, which sort of said you have to talk about a concept in either an interpretive, critical, or reflective manner. And then when I went out with my little camera, I sort of noticed that OSU has lots of buildings where things get reflected. And I started thinking about the implications of bringing together the figurative and the literal over there. So what my concept in 60 video essentially did was it layered the whole concept of reflection.
I can think and overthink something, so I really just needed to start. But I think the way that I started it was to think about, you hit play when you start something. So then I started thinking about the word play, and I started looking for things that used it and in different ways, because I had watched those NPR videos that we started with, and some of them had play on words kind of thing, which is another thing with play. And one of the first clips that I found said, let's play a game. And so I got hooked on the word game, and because I felt like we had a very limited amount of time, I just started looking for every instance I could find of games. And I was already underway before I had realized that I'd chosen a concept and ran with it.
Yes, for the concept in 60 video, basically, it was easy to close my palette because I let Scott's voice define what I did. So, I had this voice, so then it was for me to have fun with it. So just the idea of what can I demonstrate, how can I demonstrate multimodality over his voice, how can I, emphasize what he was trying to get across to us with his voice. By limiting myself to his voice, it actually made it quite easy. Whereas other people, I think, not struggled, but it was harder to tell a story. I didn't have to tell a story.
With a lot of my creative writing that I do, I like to work with existing materials. So I'll do poems from found text or things like that. And so I think because I was in an unfamiliar situation, kind of my go-to response was, well, let me just collect some stuff and then I can figure out what to do with it from there. So I enjoyed the process of just kind of walking around and getting footage and taking pictures of things in video and audio, and then kind of, then having something to start with. I don't think that was necessarily ideal then for them, creating something. There were a lot of gaps, but because I didn't really know where to start and because it was new, I think I reverted back to a process that I'm familiar with, just in a new context.
It sounds like searching around and kind of seeing what came up when you did a keyword search was a large part of your process for finding materials and kind of shaping that product.
Definitely. And I often have my students do, especially image searches, before they even start trying to put together a thesis or even a keyword search. Just look at, try to be inspired by the pictures and see what all these pictures add up to, these pieces of a bigger whole. And it really worked out well for me.
So I just kind of started finding things that I thought were visually appealing, and the Prelinger archive was just, they were fascinating old PSAs about how to date and how to be a respectful gentleman to your lady friend, and they were just really funny. So I just had fun looking through those things, and I found that to be really generative.
So you felt like kind of the material you found was kind of helped you to kind of turn a corner and find something to latch onto?
Definitely, yeah, and that I think is kind of a bit of the difficulty. You have so many options. Everything that is freely available through these fair use licenses is available to you, and so where do you even start? And I found the archives a very helpful place to start.
was that?
I had kind of ideas for specific kinds of videos I might want to have in there somewhere, you know, like hands like gathering apples and putting them into a basket or something. But I quickly realized, and one of our facilitators, Truman, kind of echoed this as well when he was giving me advice, that it's really hard to try to find that exact thing you want and stick it in there. And I found that what was even more satisfying in a way was to find a video in an archive or images in an archive that kind of related to a keyword search I did, but kind of interpreted that idea in a new way, and including those into the composition I was making made it go in interesting directions that I hadn't anticipated. So kind of working from what I could find rather than what I could think of kind of became the mode of operation for me.
Yeah, it was ducks, I believe. I just got some footage of ducks and trees and things on campus, and I thought, this really isn't going anywhere. But I was trying to just take a picture of a tree, and I had a notebook, and it was a windy day, and I put my notebook down on the bench, and the wind blew it, and all the pages went like that, and I luckily I got it on camera, and I thought, oh, that looks really cool. And then I was working in the lab at night, and there was no one there the first night, so I was just sitting there till 10 o'clock, I was watching some op docs on NewYorkTimes.com and things like that, and I thought, you really have to have like a research question for these. Basically, you need to have something behind it, and I really liked that image of the papers going, and then it was the mixture of the image of the pages sort of flying, and then the effect on iMovie where you can make something play backwards. I thought that was really neat, so I thought, well, what if maybe I could do something in terms of turning back time.
So for me, it was thinking in terms of a series of still images. In a way, I think that's kind of like an outline. It's like, I have these images, and how do I want to develop those and flesh them out and make something else with them. In the same way that when I start writing, I have this, I kind of have these concepts that may or may not be related. Often when you get to the revision stage, you realize they're not as related as you thought, and you're cutting big chunks of them. So in that way, I think it was very similar, because I started with way more than I needed, and I kind of then went through this filtering process of deciding what was relevant and what wasn't, which may be more revision than invention, so I don't know if I'm walking around your question. And it was different because instead of reading, which is normally what I do for invention, I do a lot of reading to kind of get... I didn't do that. I walked around and looked at things.
Well, it's funny. I started thinking a little bit about it before the seminar began, and I didn't know all of the dimensions of the task. But I noticed that my thinking about it, my mulling it over and trying to get started, was guided by, in a way that is very similar to how I think, planned and formed my own alphabetic work, right? And that was to think of a significant form that then really became the core notion for the video itself. But that seems to be how my own cognitive style is really enhanced. I've often thought to myself, I believe in this notion that form finds form. That if we have something that Ann Berthoff taught me a long time ago, that this idea that if we have some, and I'm calling it a significant form, that is a generative form in mind, it will actually be the seed that will help evolve the rest of it. So I think in the same way that people sometimes begin with, say, a title for an essay, a piece of academic work that is, this kind of condenses the key idea. That's how I work.